Thank you. Welcome to the Rules and City Government Committee. Please note for the record, committee members Alderman Arnett and Alderman Savage are in attendance, as well as several other staff persons who will be recognized at the appropriate time. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
Move approval of the agenda. Move approval.
That motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the agenda as written. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, second item is approval of the minutes for the April 6th meeting.
Move approval of the minutes.
I'll second that motion.
It's actually a minute.
Oh, it says approval of the minutes.
I know, but there's only one item.
Well, yeah. So, okay, all in favor of approving the minutes as written, please say aye.
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 Okay, thank you. We have two pieces of legislation on our agenda. The first is O4720, local zoning map amendment for the purpose of rezoning parcel 1340 grid 0008 tax map 052A, known as 21 Maryland Avenue, Annapolis, Maryland, to be zoned in its entirety as C1 Conservation Residence Zoning District. And I think we have Dr. Nash with us to talk about the need for this zoning amendment.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dr. Nash. So tell us, it's pretty clear, but if you'd like to give us any background on the need for this ordinance.
Okay, so you may remember in 2016, we updated all of our zoning maps and we put them into a GIS layer, which they had never been in it before. But at some point in that, we accidentally moved the line a little bit over on this one property, which we only happened to discover recently. We tried to contact the property owners who are in Colorado. We sent them a regular letter and certified letter and never heard anything back. So the Planning Commission recommended approval, basically just fixing a previous error.
Let me ask, did you hear from the property owners when the error was made?
Well, we didn't notify them because we didn't know we were changing their zoning.
Okay. If you look at the maps that were attached to the legislation, I think it's pretty clear, pretty cut and dry. Any questions from the committee?
I would
Dr. Nash?
move that we recommend approval to the City Council.
Second that motion.
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, giving a favorable recommendation for O4720, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you, Dr. Nash.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Nash, could I ask you a favor? I've been looking for it. Could you send me the draft mobility APF legislation that you crafted with Mr. Johnson?
Certainly.
I'd like to review that, and I think I'd like to submit it for this term, but
Okay.
I can't find it.
I will send it to you.
Sorry to bother you with that,
No
but
problem.
thank you.
Okay, the second piece of legislation is O1121, compensation of the alderman, alderwoman, and city manager for the purpose of adjusting the compensation and allowances to be paid to the aldermen and alderwomen for the term of office commencing on the first Monday in December 2021, and for adjusting the compensation to be paid to the city manager. And this is sponsored by Alderman Gay. I think if we turn to page 3 of the legislation, you'll see the significant changes that are being proposed by the alderman. And I think Ms. Hopkins is with us. if there's anything you would like to share
What a
about
way to
this.
freeze.
Pardon me?
You're frozen.
And you were in a big O.
Isn't that always the way?
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to add about this legislation or share with us about it?
I have not seen the amended legislation or recommended amendments. Maybe you could bring me up to speed on that. I'm trying to, between two computers here, trying to pull that up.
I didn't know there were amendments.
I think she's talking about the changes that are being proposed in this ordinance.
The legislation itself.
Oh,
Yes,
oh, never mind. Then I am.
Yeah, there are no other amendments that I've seen.
Okay.
It's just the changes proposed, and they're on page 3 of the legislation.
Yeah, so I actually served as support to this commission. I did the research and provided that to them, which they then evaluated. And I mean, clearly there are different ways to approach compensation when it comes to elected officials. They had chose to go with what a number of other jurisdictions were doing, which is tying things to the CPI. There are other jurisdictions that did a combination of things where it could have been tied to the CPI or to what employees were receiving in a cost of living adjustment, but the lesser of the two tended to be what the research was showing. And then, of course, there's just not any real uniformity across government jurisdictions in terms of how councils operate. Like a lot of councils operate with a part-time mayor, and that mayor may or may not be on the council. And so their form of government differs as well across the different jurisdictions in Maryland. And all I did was comparisons in Maryland.
Did you do any comparisons of salaries?
Yes. Yes. And so they were given a survey, which they evaluated. And they also, during the course of their deliberation, wanted to know what our department directors were making. And they wanted the compensation survey didn't get into what directors were making in other jurisdictions, but that was really more of a city manager to directors and some expressed concern, not from our city manager. First, I want to make it very clear that our city manager did not weigh in on that at all. But just looking at whether there would be compression between what the city manager was making and what were the salaries that the department directors were going to make over time, and how much of a difference there was between the current city manager's pay and projected pay for directors. So that was evaluated. So he looked at the city manager, the chief administrative officer, each council member, also distinguished between whether the council had a council president and a council vice president, which a few do. And so that was brought into play, as well as the mayor's salary.
So no comparison of salaries of aldermen or council members?
Yes,
So
there was. Yes, there was. So we looked at the, of course, most jurisdictions that are in an election cycle are going, they do a very similar thing where it's a salary review commission. Mm-hmm. And that salary review commission is doing projected recommendations for the outlying years. It's after an election, it's implemented, absolutely on target with the way our language is written as well. And so the comparisons aren't going to be what's projected because that wasn't available yet, but what was already in place.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say I was able to find some of the salary review commission's reports from different jurisdictions and then use that. So that way I was there. I'm sorry. My dog has to talk too. And so what I was able to do is, in some cases, was to get those salary review commission reports, and I could get more into what was their thinking, why were they making the decisions they were making, what did they deliberations. So the jurisdictions do you want me to tell you that? The jurisdictions I gave them information on?
Well, what I'm really interested in is how our salaries rank with other municipalities' alderman salaries. For part-time.
Definitely in the bottom half.
Mm-hmm.
So you have, I'll just give you some examples. You have a council member in Anne Arundel County being paid $41,133, and then they have a chair and a vice chair. The chair making $46,000, and then Baltimore City is just kind of way out in front there. Their council members, it's a very large council. They're very highly compensated relative to other councils. Then you have like the city of College Park, where a council member is making $7,000 a year, and the mayor is making $10,500, and clearly a part-time mayor, not a full-time mayor like we have. Mm-hmm. Then the city of Frederick compensates all of their, excuse me.
It's a big dog.
He is. He's helping me through COVID. Right now, he thinks it's fun time. Sorry. So, for example, I think I was talking about the city of Frederick. City of Frederick is compensating their council members at $25,000, and their mayor is at $90,000. So Frederick is kind of closer to us, both in terms of size and function. So it's all over the place. From a compensation study professional here, it's hard to draw appropriate inferences from it. It's, as we all know, when it's such a visible decision that gets a lot of attention from all different facets, manner in which a lot of these jurisdictions have proceeded is tying things through a cost of a consumer price and ECI, which is an employee cost price indicator. And the idea of that is that that you're also investing in benefits for employees, so it allows for an adjustment to the CPI costs on the basis of what the costs are. Those are the differences there. But like I said, some of these jurisdictions, they set their chief administrative officer, their city manager, whatever that person's title is, through almost like a negotiation between the elected leaders and that individual. Like Bowie, for example, that's a contract that whatever is given to the city manager is really the breadth and depth of their negotiation skills, and then final approval by the council to give that. And so a lot of times you'll see a tremendous difference in the amount of compensation that happens in some of those jurisdictions. Whereas our city manager, that amount is clearly set by law. And because of that, it's very visible, and it's very similar in the path here that we take in looking at the council's compensation and the mayor's compensation. I'll just speak from my concern. And one of the items that is in the code that addresses the city manager's pay has to do with cost of living. And I believe that amount, that provision was put in there to make sure you weren't losing ground with the compensation given to the city manager. There were those kinds of pay increases that were happening with the workforce, because you're talking about the person is the highest executive leader of the exempt and the civil service workforce, except for the mayors, but falls under the mayor's purview, obviously. But in that regard, the language said every 2 years would be provided a COLA. Administratively, I'll just tell you from an HR perspective, it's like, well, what do you do with that? Well, why would it be every 2 years? And do you just give the COLA amount that's given on that odd year, or are you, which year is that? And so I mentioned that to the commission, and that's why they came back with the language that said, in order to put it in line with the director's salary, that cost of living would be given when it's given to them, essentially. And then if none's given, then none is given. So that was the idea there. But as I said, some jurisdictions were using CPI. Some jurisdictions were using cost of living that was provided to others, to employees. And other jurisdictions were whatever's lower, this or that, whatever's lower. And some just set the rate. Just, this is what it's going to be. And the second year it goes to that. And the third year it goes to this. The fourth year it goes to that. And I worked for the county for a long time. So I saw those 4-year cycles quite often. There are term limits in county government. So obviously, the officials are only elected for a maximum of 2 terms. And maybe that puts less demand, I'm not sure, on the elected officials making a decision for a future, possibly different group of people. But for sure, there were years when it was probably a downturn in the economy, and that they didn't feel it was an appropriate thing to put anything forward for the next 4 years in terms of increases. But all I'm interested today is just tell you as much as I can tell you about the process and the information. I mean, clearly that's the council's decision when it comes to what gets voted upon. I'm not trying to persuade you one way or another there. I just want to make sure you know what I found out.
Well, and you've been very informative. I appreciate it. And I do recall when it was during Josh's administration, clearly that we did have the 4-year plan with an increase each year until it got to, I guess, the 98,000. And then it's been frozen at that since then. So,
yeah.
We've gone through that also. Alderman Savage, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Hopkins.
I'm just saying it's just challenging, and I appreciate the time and place that you're in right now.
So, Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Ms. Hopkins. I was wondering, do you know how long the council's been paid? 15,000?
Well, I've been here 8 years and 2 cycles for sure. Probably even earlier than that. I don't know. I'd have to research that, Rob. Excuse me, Alderman Savage. I'll have to take a look at that.
I remember that it was 13.6, and then it moved to 15. So it hasn't been longer than 8 years.
Well,
I think maybe
that was the last time around, but really what it was taking your stipend and blending it into your pay. So because there was a lot of conversation about the receipts necessary for your phone, you got to turn in receipts for reimbursement. And, you tended to use resources that were beyond that anyway, personally. And so the commission looked at that from the standpoint of, file your own tax receipts and deal with it that way. And they just chose to deal with the one reimbursable expense item by blending it into the pay rate.
Okay, I don't remember. I've never submitted receipts. So other than for MML, so I'm not, but I do remember that it went from, I thought it was 13.6 to 15.
I think it was 13.5 to 15.
So, and it did not impact the 1,500 that's allocated for education, and then added, I believe, expenses to that, the ability to use it for expenses.
That's something that you did during the course of I think maybe a couple years ago, did that part where he clarified the uses for it.
So, Alderman Savage, did you get your question answered?
Yeah.
Did you ask a question? Alderman Arnett?
So Alderman Gay asked me to offer an amendments to lines 11, 13, and 15 to add an extra 0 to those numbers. I'm wondering how many people on the council actually use their stipend, especially with us not going to MML anymore, because it's just too much of a pain to, like I buy print materials and so forth, and it's just like, oh, I'm not going to mess with that. But I remember Sam Shropshire used all of his and ours.
Well, he wasn't the only one. There were other of our colleagues that used all of theirs also.
Right.
And MML has not gone away. I mean, you could still go to MML this year.
Yep.
Virtually and in person, I believe. So.
I was going to say, I thought I saw they were going.
Yeah. So. So committee, do we have a motion to support Alderman Savage?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just another, I guess, point of conversation. Well, first of all, I'm personally, I think I'm good with the proposal, but I do have to wonder if, and I know we can't change this to make it to increase any of these numbers. We can only decrease, I think, with amendments. But I'm just thinking out loud here in terms of, because the other thing that I think would really help, and I'm just speaking personally, but I also think would help the council would be to get some assistance for us. So while I think this money, the increase would certainly be, I think, needed for the council, I do have to wonder if we should instead use that money to get maybe an assistant or two for the one per side of the council or something like that. Just throwing out an idea, because that, for me, I think that seems, I kind of chuckled when you said it, part-time job, because we all know it's often another full-time job in itself in terms of what we have to manage. But I think having an assistant would really certainly help make the job much more doable, while the pay increase would be nice, and I think in many ways improve the, sorry for my dog, in many ways improve the sorry, losing my train of thought here. I'll just end there. I'm rambling anyway, so that's kind of, I just want to throw that out there.
First of all, let me respond. First of all, this is not in any changes we make in this legislation is not in the proposed budget. So if you would like to add assistance or whatever, then we have to, take that back to the finance committee and to the administration to see how they would amend the budget to accommodate whatever we want to do. And this is on the agenda for Monday night, so there would be adequate time to come up with the funding. But to answer the other piece of your question, which is significant, is, we do have an associate to the council. And I contend that we are not exerting the control that we should to get what we need. So I think we should, if we would like to, Ms. Green is being pulled in different directions instead of being the associates to the council, period. And maybe they feel she doesn't have enough to do with us, which would fall on us, that we're not giving her enough stuff to do. But I think there's a discussion that needs to be had with the city attorney and the city administrator about how we utilize our city staff. She told me yesterday, she couldn't make copies for us because someone in the law department said she couldn't make copies for us. Well, that creates problems.
Yeah.
So.
I'm just looking at my notes. I think I should take you back to a question that was asked of me earlier. And I have a note in here that 8 years ago, the council's pay increase was recommended to be 18,000. And that obviously that wasn't adopted. But I think the question posed was what was the last time was really asked to be increased. And so I do remember that the commission had that piece of information, then looked very much at the year 1, 2, 3, and 4 impact and what that would look like relative to 8 years ago, making a recommendation that wasn't adopted for an $18,000 a year salary level.
I remember, and Ms. Curry was on both commissions.
That's what she was very helpful there.
Yeah.
With that information.
I don't recall, and she probably would, what the recommendation 4 years ago was, but I'm almost sure that's when it went to 15, regardless of how it went there. Alderman Arnett and then Alderman Savage.
I was going to make a motion that we recommend favorably.
Can I ask one more question?
Well, we can get the motion on the floor since it's been put on, and then we can have discussion.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Discussion, Alderman Savage.
Thank you. I guess my question, I don't know if we have anybody from the law office online, but just wondering about the language. It just seems like if we're putting something in the code, in the charter in this case, it just, the language, I think it's not going to be clear in the future because it's referring to, in year 2 of their term, in year 3, I think instead it should probably refer to actual years, dates. Unless I'm just wondering if this was language drafted by the commission or was the law office, and if it was the law office, I'm just wanting to kind of get
It was the law office that helped with that. And I believe it was patterned after the way that was described in the prior ordinance.
I mean, if it makes sense to them, then I guess it does have one date. It talks about the term of office commencing the first Monday in December 2021. I guess that's how we did it last time. It used to say 2017, it looks like. Anyway, okay.
And we could certainly get a hold of the prior legislation to see how it was written.
Isn't this?
But again, it was drafted.
This does appear to have the prior, this is the prior legislation, isn't it? Or the prior section of the code, because you can see where there's a strikeout that changed 1500.
Yeah, so it's the language of the code.
Okay.
Yeah. Further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion to give a favorable recommendation to 01121, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, let the record show that's unanimous. Thank you, Ms. Hopkins, for your background and infinite knowledge about all of this stuff. Thank you. All right.
I do have a history of stuff. Thank you.
And we
Enjoy the rest of
appreciate
your
you.
afternoon.
Thank you, you
Thank
too.
you.
All right, take care.
All right, that appears to exhaust our agenda.
Move we adjourn?
Second.
Okay, Alderman Arnett, was there something else we wanted to put on the agenda?
There was, but it is too late to do it, and I think it's next month will be fine. We were going to ask the Office of Law to come and talk to us again about the separation of powers, and it was precipitated by the city attorney's statement in his performance thing that he was drafting legislation for titles 15, 17, 21, and 22. And I kind of wondered how that wasn't stepping over into the legislative branch, which I do not believe there is one. But it's also coming up with the peace legislation. There's all kinds of comments in the staff report about this is exceeding the council's authority, which again, I don't particularly believe is the case, but clearly there's very much a differing view, and that's okay. But I think it's something we need to resolve. We ought to be operating all from the same sheet of music.
So all that to say, there's nothing that you want on next month's agenda?
Oh,
or
no,
you
no, I
want
do
that
want
on?
it.
Okay,
I do
you
want it. I do
that
want it on the agenda. Yes.
So we'll be sure to invite Mr. Lyles to the next Rules and Committee and Civic Rules and
City government.
City Government. I
Right.
can't get the
I think
words
we're
out.
all tired.
Yes, for sure. So, all right. I was thinking about something else that is going on the Finance Committee agenda that came
Well,
to our attention
it was this
today.
compensation piece, which
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay. Vice
we can-
versa. Okay. Thank you much. If there's nothing else for the good of the order, all in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Green. Thank you, Mr. Jakes. And enjoy your evening.
Have a good evening.
And Ross, I'll see you in the morning.
Yeah.